Look, I want you to imagine something with me for a second. It's 2022. You've got maybe $15,000 sitting in your savings account at Chase or Bank of America. You're earning, and I'm not kidding, 0.01% interest. That's 1 penny for every $100. Meanwhile, you're watching the news and inflation is running at 9.1%, the highest it's been in over 40 years. Your money is literally evaporating. That $15,000 in real purchasing power, it just became $13,635 in a single year. You lost whopping $365 in buying power while your bank gave you $1.50 in interest. And here's the thing that makes me genuinely frustrated. While this is happening, there's a government-backed security paying 9.62% with zero risk. Zero. And most people had no idea it existed. My name is John, and I spend way too much time thinking about why intelligent people make terrible decisions with their emergency funds and conservative investments. If you're someone who's been keeping cash in a savings account, earning basically nothing, or you've been too intimidated to understand bonds and treasury securities, or you just don't know where to safely park money you might need in the next few years, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're talking about I-Bonds and Treasury Securities. And I know what you're thinking. John, bonds are boring. Bonds are for old people. Bonds are complicated. Wrong, wrong. And, okay, kind of complicated, but that's exactly why we're here. The fundamental problem. Here's what most people don't realize. There's this massive gap in most people's financial strategy. On one side, you've got your checking account and maybe a high-yield savings account earning. What? 4.5% right now if you're lucky? On the other side, you've got your retirement accounts invested in stocks, index funds, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing. What about the money in between? What about your emergency fund? What about the down payment you're saving for a house you want to buy in 3 years? What about that $30,000 you're holding for, I don't know, life? You need it to be safe, but you also don't want inflation eating it alive. This is where Treasury securities come in, and specifically I-Bonds, which are legitimately one of the most underutilized financial tools in America. Let me hit you with a statistic that blew my mind. According to TreasuryDirect data from 2023, there are only about 50 million I-Bond accounts in existence. 50 million. Sounds like a lot, right? Except there are 258 million adults in America. That means only about 19% of American adults have ever bought an I-Bond. Meanwhile, 68% of Americans say they're worried about inflation according to Pew Research. So 2/3 of people are worried about the exact problem that I-Bonds were literally designed to solve, but only 1/5 are actually using them. That's not a coincidence. That's a knowledge gap. What are I-Bonds? The real explanation. Okay, let's break down what an I-Bond actually is, because the name tells you almost nothing. I-Bond stands for Series 1 Savings Bond, and it's a bond issued by the U.S. Treasury Department. Here's what makes it special. The interest rate adjusts for inflation. Every 6 months, the rate resets based on the Consumer Price Index, the same index that measures inflation. Now you might be thinking, John, that sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? Look, there are catches, but they're not deal breakers. They're just rules you need to understand. Let me walk through the actual mechanics. When you buy an I-Bond, you're essentially lending money to the U.S. government. In return, they pay you an interest rate made up of two components. First, there's a fixed rate that stays the same for the entire 30-year life of the bond. Right now, as of November 2024, that fixed rate is 1.20%. That's locked in forever on bonds you buy during this rate, period. Second, there's a variable inflation rate that changes every 6 months based on the CPI. This is the part that protects you from inflation. When inflation goes up, this rate goes up. When inflation goes down, this rate goes down. But here's the beautiful part. Your total rate can never go below zero. The worst-case scenario is you earn the fixed rate only. Let's do the math with real numbers because this is where it gets really interesting. Say you bought $10,000 in I-Bonds in November 2024. Your fixed rate is 1.2%. Let's say the next inflation reading comes in at 3%. Your total rate would be approximately 4.2% for that 6-month period. Not exactly that because of compounding, but close enough. Compare that to a savings account at 4.5%. You might think, well, the savings account is better. But here's what most people don't realize. That savings account rate can drop to 0.5% next month if the Fed cuts rates. Your I-bond rate adjusts with actual inflation. If inflation spikes to 6%, your I-bond rate goes up. Your savings account rate probably goes down because the Fed would be behind the curve. The restrictions and why they actually make sense. Now, let's talk about the restrictions, because this is where people get scared off. And honestly, it's where you need to be smart about how you use these. Restriction number 1. You can only buy $10,000 per person per calendar year in electronic I-bonds, plus another $5,000 in paper I-bonds if you use your tax refund. But most people don't do that. So realistically, it's $10,000 per person per year. Here's the thing though, this isn't as limiting as it sounds. If you're married, that's $20,000 per year for your household. If you've got kids, you can buy I-bonds for them too. You can set up trusts, LLCs. There are ways to scale this if you really want to. But for most people, $10,000 a year is actually plenty for building up an inflation-protected emergency fund over time. Restriction number 2. You can't touch the money for 12 months. This is a hard stop. You buy an I-bond, it's locked up for a year. Period. No emergencies, no exceptions. This is why you don't put your entire emergency fund into I-bonds on day 1. You build it up strategically. Restriction number 3. If you cash out before 5 years, you lose the last 3 months of interest. So if you hold an I-bond for 18 months and then cash it out, you get 15 months of interest. If you hold it for 3 years and cash out, you get 2 years and 9 months of interest. Now you might be thinking, John, that sounds terrible. I'm losing money. No, you're not. Here's the psychological shift you need to make. You're not losing money. You're just not getting all of it. Let's say you earned 4% over those 18 months. Losing 3 months means you're effectively getting about 3% annualized instead of 4%. That's still probably better than most savings accounts. And you were protected from inflation the whole time. And here's what nobody talks about. If you hold for 5 years, there's no penalty. 0. You get every penny of interest. So the strategic move is to buy I-bonds with money you won't need for at least a year, ideally 5 years, but can access after a year, if absolutely necessary. The latter strategy. This is the key. This is where it gets really interesting, and this is the strategy that most people miss. You don't just buy $10,000 in I-bonds and call it a day. You build a ladder. Here's how it works. Let's say you've got $30,000 in your emergency fund sitting in a savings account right now. You want to move it to I-bonds for better inflation protection, but you're worried about the 12-month lockup period. Year 1. Take $10,000, buy I-bonds in January. Keep the other $20,000 in your high-yield savings account. That's still your emergency money. Year 2. In January, buy another $10,000 in I-Bonds. Now you've got $20,000 in I-Bonds and $10,000 liquid. But here's the thing. That first $10,000 from year 1, it's now accessible. You're past the 12-month mark. So actually, you've got $20,000 accessible, $10,000 in cash, $10,000 in year 1 I-Bonds, plus $10,000 locked for 11 more months. Year 3, buy another $10,000. Now you've got $30,000 in I-Bonds, but $20,000 of it is accessible anytime, and the newest $10,000 unlocks in 12 months. Look, within 3 years, your entire emergency fund is in I-Bonds earning inflation-protected returns, but you've never had less than $20,000 accessible at any given time. And if you never touch it, by year 5, you've got 0 penalties on any withdrawals. Let me show you the math on why this matters. Let's say inflation averages 3% over those 5 years, and your I-Bonds average about 4.2% total return, 1.2% fixed plus 3% inflation. $30,000 in I-Bonds at 4.2% for 5 years, I will draw $37,395. $30,000 in a savings account at 1%, because we know rates drop over time, equal $31,530. That's a difference of $5,865. Almost $6,000 you just made by understanding one simple financial tool and being patient. Other Treasury securities, the full toolkit. Now, I-Bonds are amazing for emergency funds and medium-term savings, but they're not the only tool in the Treasury toolkit. Let me break down the other options because this is where you can really optimize your conservative investments. Treasury bills, T-bills. These are short-term securities. 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 13 weeks, 26 weeks, or 52 weeks. You buy them at a discount and get paid the full face value at maturity. The difference is your interest. Here's the thing about T-bills. They're basically as safe as cash, but they're paying way more than most checking accounts right now. As of late 2024, a 6-month T-bill is yielding around 4.5 to 5%. That's the same as many high-yield savings accounts, but the interest is exempt from state and local taxes. Let's do the math. If you're in California with a 9.3% state income tax, and you've got $50,000 to park for 6 months, a T-bill at 4.8% saves you about $223 in state taxes compared to a savings account at the same rate. It's not life-changing, but it's free money for doing basically nothing differently. Treasury notes, T-notes. These are medium-term, 2, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. They pay interest every 6 months, and you get your principal back at maturity. Here's what most people don't realize about T-notes. You don't have to hold them to maturity. You can sell them anytime on the secondary market. But, and this is important, if interest rates have gone up since you bought them, you'll sell at a loss. If rates have gone down, you'll sell at a profit. This is actually super useful for tax planning. Let's say you bought a 10-year T-note in 2021 when rates were 1.5%, and now rates are at 4.5%. Your bond is worth way less than you paid. But if you sell it at a loss, you can use that loss to offset capital gains from stocks or other investments. It's called tax loss harvesting, and it's a legitimate strategy. Treasury bonds, T-bonds. These are long-term, 20 or 30 years, same deal as T-notes, just longer duration. Higher interest rate risk, but historically higher yields. Most people don't need T-bonds unless they're doing very specific retirement planning or they're trying to lock in rates for decades. They're more volatile, and for most people's stability needs, T-notes or I-bonds make more sense. Tips. Treasury inflation protected securities. Okay, This is where people get confused because TIPS sound exactly like I-bonds, but they're different. TIPS also adjust for inflation, but the mechanism is different. With TIPS, the principal adjusts with inflation. So if you buy a $10,000 TIPS and inflation goes up 3%, your principal becomes $10,300, and your interest rate, which is fixed, applies to that new principal. The big difference: TIPS are marketable securities. You can buy and sell them anytime. I-bonds are not marketable. You can only redeem them to the Treasury. Also, with TIPS, you pay taxes every year on the inflation adjustment even though you don't receive that money until maturity. It's called phantom income, and it's annoying. With I-bonds, you can defer all taxes until you cash out, or even avoid them entirely if you use them for education expenses. For most people building stability, I-bonds are better than TIPS because of the tax treatment and the fact that you don't have to worry about market fluctuations. TIPS are more for sophisticated investors doing specific inflation hedging in larger portfolios. The real psychology of stability. Here's what I really want you to understand, because this is where the psychological shift happens. Most people think about their money in terms of growth. How much can I make? What's the highest return? And look, I get it. Growth is exciting. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Growth requires risk, and risk requires stability. Let me explain what I mean. In 2022, the S&P 500 dropped 18%. If you had $100,000 invested, you were down to $82,000. Now, if you're young, and that's now, if retirement money, you hold tight, you don't panic, you maybe even buy more because everything's on sale. That's the right move. But you can only make that right move if you're not stressed about money. You can only hold through a market crash if you know your emergency fund is safe, if you know your short-term goals are funded, if you know you're not going to be forced to sell stocks at the worst possible time because you need cash. This is where Treasury securities create stability that enables growth. Let's say you're 30 years old. You've got $50,000 saved up. You know you need an emergency fund. Maybe you want to buy a house in 5 years. But you also want to invest for retirement. Most people do one of two things. Option 1. They keep everything in a savings account because they're scared of the stock market. They're being safe, but they're losing to inflation every single year. Over 30 years, even at just 3% inflation, that $50,000 has the purchasing power of about $2,600. They've lost almost 60% of their money's value by playing it safe. Option 2. They dump everything into stocks because they read that the stock market averages 10% per year. Then a crash happens, they panic, they need money, they sell at a loss, and they swear off investing forever. Both of these people are making the same mistake. They're not separating stability money from growth money. Here's the better approach. Take $30,000, build an I-bond and T-bill ladder over 3 years like we talked about. That's your stability. That's your foundation. That money is protected from inflation, it's government-backed, it's safe. The other $20,000? Invested aggressively. Index funds, retirement accounts, whatever matches your risk tolerance. And here's the beautiful part. Because you know your foundation is secure, you can actually leave that $20,000 alone. You don't panic sell. You let it grow. Over 30 years, that $20,000 at 10% average return becomes $349,000, your $30,000 in Treasury. Securities, even at a conservative 3% average, become $72,000. Total, $421,000. Compare that to keeping all $50,000 in a savings account at 1%, $67,000. Or putting all $50,000 in stocks, but panic selling during a crash and missing the recovery, Who knows? But probably way less than $421,000. This is the power of understanding how different tools work together. The common objections and why they're wrong. Now you might be thinking, okay, John, this sounds good, but interest rates are high right now. Shouldn't I just use a high-yield savings account? Look, here's the thing about high-yield savings accounts. They're not actually high-yield. They're high-yield compared to traditional savings accounts, which pay nothing. But the rate isn't guaranteed. In 2019, the best high-yield savings accounts were paying 2.5%. By 2020, they were paying 0.6%. The rate dropped by 75% in less than a year. And you know what? If you had I-Bonds during that time, your rate dropped too because inflation was low, but then in 2021 and 2022, when inflation spiked, your I-Bond rate went to 7%, then 9.6%, while savings accounts were still at like 0.5%. The point is, I-Bonds track inflation. Savings accounts track whatever the bank feels like paying you, which is usually as little as possible. $10,000 a year isn't enough to make a difference. Okay, let's do the math on this because this objection drives me crazy. Year 1, $10,000. Year 2, $20,000. Year 3, $30,000. Year 4, $40,000. Year 5, $50,000. In 5 years, you've got $50,000 in I-bonds. For a lot of people, that's their entire emergency fund. For others, it's a house down payment. For others, it's their kids' college fund. And remember, if you're married, double those numbers. Plus, you can buy for your kids. A family of 4 can legally buy $40,000 per year in I-bonds. But here's the real point. The limit forces you to be disciplined. It forces you to build this up over time. And that's actually a good thing because it prevents you from making emotional decisions with all your money at once. The website is terrible. Okay, you got me on this one. TreasuryDirect is legitimately one of the worst websites I've ever used. It looks like it was designed in 1997 because it basically was. The security is annoying, the interface is confusing, and the whole experience feels like you're filing taxes. But here's the thing. You use it maybe once or twice a year. You buy your I-bonds, you close the browser, and you forget about it. The bad website is not a reason to miss out on inflation protection. And honestly, the fact that the website is bad is probably why more people don't use I-bonds. It's a friction point. But if you can get past that friction, you're accessing a tool that most people are too lazy or too intimidated to use. And that's actually an advantage. The action plan. What to do right now. All right, let's bring this home with concrete action steps, because knowledge without action is just entertainment. Step 1. Assess your cash position. Look at how much money you have sitting in checking accounts, savings accounts, money market funds, anything that's meant to be safe money. Add it all up. That's your starting point. Step 2. Decide your stability allocation. How much of that money is truly emergency fund money? How much is for a goal within 5 years? How much is just sitting there because you don't know what else to do with it? A good rule of thumb, 3 to 6 months of expenses in emergency fund, plus any money for goals within 5 years. Everything else should probably be invested more aggressively if you're young, or in a proper retirement allocation if you're older. Step 3. Open a TreasuryDirect account. Yes, the website sucks. Yes, it's annoying. Do it anyway. Go to treasurydirect.gov, click Open an account, and suffer through the process. It takes maybe 20 minutes. You need your social security number, bank account info, and the patience of a saint, but you only do this once. Step 4. Buy your first I-bonds. Start with whatever you can. If it's $1,000, great. If it's the full $10,000, even better. Set a reminder in your calendar for next January to buy more. If you want to get fancy, you can split your purchases. Buy in January and July to take advantage of rate changes. But honestly, for most people, just buying once a year in January is fine and keeps it simple. Step 5. Build your T-bill ladder if needed. If you've got more than $10,000 in stability money that you want to deploy before next year's I-bond purchase, look at T-bills. You can buy these through TreasuryDirect too, or through your brokerage account at Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, wherever. Buy T-bills in staggered maturities, some at 4 weeks, some at 13 weeks, some at 26 weeks. This gives you regular access to cash while still earning more than a savings account. Step 6. Automate and forget. Set calendar reminders for your annual I-bond purchases. Otherwise, don't think about this. Think. Money. That's the whole point of stability money. It's boring, it's safe, it's there when you need it, and you don't have to stress about it. The bigger picture. Look, here's what I want you to understand about all of this. I-bonds and Treasury securities aren't going to make you rich. They're not sexy. You're not going to brag to your friends about your killer I-bond returns. But they're going to do something way more important. They're going to give you a foundation. And that foundation is what allows you to take smart risks with the rest of your money. It's what allows you to invest aggressively in your retirement accounts without losing sleep. It's what allows you to start a business, or switch careers, or take a sabbatical, because you know you've got 6 months of expenses locked up safely, earning a decent return. The people who build real wealth aren't the ones who take crazy risks with all their money. They're the ones who separate their money into buckets: stability money, growth money, and fun money, and treat each bucket appropriately. Treasury securities are your stability bucket. They're boring, they're safe, they're inflation protected, and they're one of the few financial tools that does exactly what it says it's going to do with zero surprises. I've been buying I-bonds every year since 2019. I've got a ladder built up. It's not exciting. I don't check the balance. I don't stress about it. It's just there, protecting a chunk of my net worth from inflation, giving me options, giving me security. And that security, that's what lets me invest aggressively with the rest of my portfolio. That's what lets me take career risks. That's what lets me sleep well at night, knowing that if everything else goes wrong, I've got a foundation that can't be shaken. So here's my challenge to you. Stop making excuses. Stop overthinking this. Open that TreasuryDirect account this week. Buy your first I-bond. Start building your foundation, because the best time to build stability was 5 years ago. The second best time is right now. If this video helped you understand I-bonds and Treasury securities, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me if you're going to buy your first I-bond this year. I read every single comment, and I want to hear your plan. And look, I know this stuff can be overwhelming. That's why I make these videos. Because once you understand these tools, once you see how the math works, once you get past the initial friction of setting everything up, it becomes easy. And easy systems that protect your wealth, that's how you actually build financial security. Thanks for watching. Now go open that account and take action.